agenda, so I do want to get started. I'm Doreen Tannenbaum. I am the Strategic Initiatives and Communications Manager for our Procurement Services Department. Today, we're going to go over our Manhattan Stitching presentation from one of our Platinum sponsors from our Supplier Showcase last month. And we'll also be going over submitting a successful requisition. Next slide, please. I'm going to keep this very brief. We have transitioned over to ServiceNow over the summer. So if you do have any issues that you'd like to address, please send us a ServiceNow ticket instead of an email. We used to do that procurement@uci.edu email. We're transitioning that over to ServiceNow. It will still generate a ticket, but I will recommend opening a ticket in the next slide, and I'll show you why. You can literally pick exactly what type of request type you have. So if it's a conflict of interest, if it's a high value procurement or strategic sourcing, if it's supplier diversity, small business first. And then next slide, please. And then you can pick from a more detailed request area here, and then that's going to help route your ticket to the appropriate team member in our central procurement, and that's going to get your issue resolved a lot faster than just sending an email directly to procurement. Next slide, please. Just a reminder that we do have our training videos and guides on our website, including this session. It's going to get recorded and dropped off on the training session side there. And next slide, please. We also have one-on-one training guides, and if you would like to have a one-on-one training session with our team or with, for your group, please send us a ServiceNow ticket and we can set that up for you. Next slide, please. Over the summer, we switched over to bi-weekly office hours. We actually had one this morning, and great attendance, and I think we went through a lot of really wonderful issues that we're going to transcribe and put into our Q&As on our website. So if you ever have any questions, we have FAQs on the top of our website, and a lot of the issues that come up in our office hours get transferred over to there. And we will have our next one in 2 weeks. It's every other Tuesday from 9 to 10. If you'd like to join us in the future, just send me an email and I'll forward you that link. I'm going to turn it over to Snehal Bhatt now. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. Welcome, everybody. We appreciate you all taking the time from your busy schedules to attend this training sessions. I hope you find that valuable, and that's why you come. Wanted to, of course, make sure that you all are very much aware and familiar with the various policies that we are required to adhere to. And it is a responsibility of each and every one of us, including yourself, to be knowledgeable and understanding what the policies are so that you can adhere to it and comply with those policies. Just as a quick reference, that there is a delegation of authority that's been granted to the Central Procurement Office that is only office that is allowed to sign agreements. So please do not have anybody in your department sign any agreements on behalf of the UCI campus. That is something that you should be very mindful of and not let anybody do that. We'll keep this very short because, as Doreen said, we have quite a lot of things to cover. We have a packed agenda, and we want to give time to our Platinum sponsor, Manhattan Stitching, to give their presentation. And then we want to spend time talking about how to submit a successful requisition, which is a very insightful information that you all probably will enjoy listening to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Corey, and you can go ahead and introduce yourself and take it from here. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having myself and our company, Manhattan Stitching Company. We've been a licensed vendor at UCI for many years. I'm also an Irvine resident, lived here for 20 years. Our company, Manhattan Stitching Company, we do screen printing, embroidery, and promotional items. We also do sublimation and a few other things that I'm going to kind of briefly talk about. Yeah, let me see here. Sorry. Oh, here we go. So our company's been in business for 25 years. We do all of our production in-house. So We do all our embroidery, screen printing. We have about 48 incredible people that work at our company. We are a family-owned business. We're also a certified small business manufacturer. We're also members of the Fair Labor Association and a silver member of EcoVadis, which is a sourcing group that we're part of, that we've been vetted, making sure we're not using unauthorized vendors for apparel, sweatshops, things like that. We also have a California garment license, and we also offer the most competitive pricing at UCI. Here's a list of a bunch of departments that we work with. I would consider us, our company, we've done, work with many and most departments, and just wanted to give you kind of an overview of some of the departments here. Some of the other companies that we work with, just to show you on like kind of on a also larger scale, we are licensed at UCLA, at LMU. We do work for Cal State Fullerton. We do work for the Los Angeles Lakers. We do work for Baby to Baby, which is a great nonprofit. Work with Disneyland. We have a lot of big companies that we work with, but then we also work with, small businesses, cities, schools, things like that. So, talking about screen printing, we do traditional screen printing, but we also do specialized screen printing like puff printing, foil printing, glow in the dark. So if you have any specialized projects that you want to do something unique, we can offer that. For embroidery, we again do traditional flat embroidery, but we also do puff embroidery, tackle twill, chenille, which are like kind of the raised letters on a sweatshirt, and custom patches. We also have a pretty large promotional item department. So besides, we do the screen printing embroidery in-house, none of the licensees at UCI do promotional items in-house. We use third-party suppliers that have all been vetted for mugs, pens, lanyards. What makes our company unique is we don't have a sales team of 30 to 40 sales reps. So those traditional promo companies that are licensed, they have to pay a 50% commission to their sales reps. We pass that savings right to the different departments and the people that order from us at UCI. That allows us to be extremely competitive, where they can't typically compete on price when it comes to promotional items. Luis, you want to discuss sublimation? Oh, I don't know if he's on here.
I'm here. Hey, how's it going, guys? Yeah, sublimation is if you want to do some custom jerseys, softball jerseys, soccer jerseys, or even like something that's super in right now, EA Sports, with fully customized jerseys. Usually we would do that with sublimation. We can also do sweaters, sports shirts, custom pouches like the one you see on here, or blankets. We can do fully colored blankets, and that's usually done through our sublimation process. And then large format printing is something that we also do. We offer flags, pull-ups, trade show displays, kind of like the backdrop and the table cover that we had available at the show. We can do event tents, we can do table covers, custom podiums, and even vehicle wraps if you guys wanted to. We offer that as well. Live screen printing is pretty cool. It's something that we just started, diving into. We've done a couple of events, and we've seen that they're very engaging. The people that attend these events, really love it. It's good to increase brand visibility, right? It's a good educational piece as well. Some people will walk up like, "Oh, can I print the shirt?" Like, sure, here you go. It's something that's, really, really cool, and we found that the community likes it. And it could be done to create revenue, do a fundraiser, or just to build community support. So live screen printing is also an option. And we would love to come out to the campus or to an event and print some shirts away.
So the order processing is pretty simple. You know, we have a customer at UCI, they'll email us kind of what they're looking for. We could present a, proposal of ideas. I always try to work backwards as a company, where what I mean by that is I'll ask kind of what their budget is. I'm always trying to work within their budget. If there's an item that might be a little bit out of budget, I'll bring the price down because I know how budget conscious, especially in the education field and colleges, want to stretch their money. Then we'll process the order, place it. We have an art department, a full art department. So you'll see a virtual proof, you'll prove it, and then we go into production. When it comes to embroidery and screen printing, we do that in-house. I think we're only one of a couple vendors, licensees at UCI that actually do the screen printing and embroidery in-house. Usually, typically, we ask for 7 to 10 business days, but we can turn things around in 24 hours if we needed to. With promotional items, it's typically 2 to 3 weeks because they're a third party suppliers that we use. But again, we have certain suppliers that can offer rushes. So if there is a tighter time frame, like you need something in a week, we can probably find a partner with our promotional suppliers to find that. So there are rush options. We do design development. So Louise, who's on here, he's my general manager and he's one of the lead graphic artists. So if you have a concept and you want us to help create a t-shirt while using the UCI logo, which will of course have to be approved through licensing, everything gets approved, we could help design. We'll keep you on track to making sure that you're using the logo appropriately and you're using the correct colors. You're also using the correct garment colors. They have a very strict policy through the UC regions as a whole, especially UCI, that we abide by, and we're very strict with that. But we'll guide you through the process. We also do full fulfillment. So if you have something where you're doing a campaign that you need the items to be drop shipped, we have a warehouse staff and a team where we can fold, bag, tag, and ship. So that's something that's nice. If say the students are working remote especially during COVID, things had to be shipped remotely. So we did a lot of fulfillment during that time, and we're set up to do a high level of fulfillment for customers and for UCI. Again, just to recap, I think kind of what separates us, give an example, we're asked to quote through HR, a jacket. The jacket retail on the site shows $60. That's what everyone's going to see from us or another vendor. Our real cost on that specific jacket is $30. Most of our competitors are going to charge $60 or more to include the branding. We quoted it out at, I think, at like $40 or $45, including everything. The customer told me, he's like, "Are you sure? I got quotes. Does this make sense?" I go, "Yeah, we work on a much lower margin. We don't have commissionable sales reps that we're sharing profits with, and we're going to pass the savings on." And each and every time we do an order, we're 99.9% the lowest price, and it doesn't sacrifice the quality because our competitors they're great companies, but they have to use companies like ours to get the screen printing and embroidery done. So they have an extra step to even to do what we're doing in-house, which really gives us a nice competitive advantage when it comes to quality, turnaround, and price. And I'm just going to leave it open if there's any questions.
We do have a question. So Jill is asking, when my team receives the invoices after we place the order, do we need to submit the payment without the items, or can we submit the payments after we've received the products?
So you can absolutely, we can receive payment after you receive the product. Payment is structured different for different departments. Typically, we ask for a purchase order. That's the best way. So everything is going through the accounting system through UCI. You submit a requisition, the PO purchase order comes to us, and then we're good to go. And you don't even have to worry about trying to get us paid. We'll submit the invoice through the back end through the accounting department. If some departments pay by credit card, and absolutely, we don't mind paying after we deliver the product.
Do we have any other questions for Corey or for Luis?
Corey, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to our departmental buyers. I know I missed seeing you at the showcase. I know you kind of got down with COVID right at that time. So second year in a row, we couldn't meet. Hopefully next year we will get a chance to meet.
I'm working on my strength. I'll be there. Thank you for having us, and we really appreciate all the opportunities that we've had at UCI. And again, we're a great family business, and we'd love continue the opportunities of working and doing a great job. So thank you.
Yes, and I did want to mention that Corey and Manhattan Stitching actually are local, so they have he lives in Irvine, but they have their factory actually in Yorba Linda. So they are actually a very local small business. So all around, it's very helpful
And
to
also,
have somebody local.
I did want to add, we offer free delivery for all our screen printing and embroidery jobs, where most the competitors or licensees will charge for that. We don't charge. We're delivering to UCI 5 days a week, and we offer that right to your office. You don't have to come to our shop to pick up. We'll always offer that. So.
There was another question that came in. They want to know if you charge a credit card fee if they pay through credit card.
Yeah, we do get charged a fee of 3% through the credit card company. So we do ask for that. Again, if that is something that's difficult and you need us to waive that because of a budget, I'll never say no. I'll accommodate. We're pretty flexible.
And we have another comment from AJ saying, thanks, we were looking for a vendor. So I think you got a new customer, Corey.
Well, thank you. I'm ready for the call and email.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Corey. Appreciate it. Thank you, Louis. Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Hope that was helpful for you to connect with a supplier directly and hear from them what they have to offer. So now we are going to go into the meat of the training, submitting meaningful purchase requisitions. You're going to hear from Andrew Calderon, who's going to walk you through some of the best practices in submitting a requisition and some of the things that to avoid. And then we'll have Sarosh and Helen Chang also contributing to the presentation. So Andrew, why don't you take it from here, introduce yourself, and walk them through.
Thank you, Snehal. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Andrew Calderon, the Contracts Manager within Procurement Services. Today, when we talk about submitting a meaningful requisition, I want to be clear that we're not talking about the how-to, right? Use this drop-down, fill in this field, click this submit button or calculate button before you submit. Nor are we talking about all of the prerequisites that you have to maybe include with the requisition depending on what you're buying or what your fund source is. Today, we're exclusively talking about the substance of what you're typing into the requisition, because a very well-written and meaningful requisition can make a big difference in how quickly we can get that thing approved. Okay, so the first key is to understand what is the purpose of a requisition, right? And it is to begin the KFS process to complete a purchase transaction with another party. That seems simple enough, but I will explain why that's important to keep that in mind. The second purpose of the requisition is that it allows us, central procurement or a department buyer, to create a PO agreement that's issued to the supplier. And we want to issue a meaningful agreement so that it obligates them to deliver the goods and services that we want, or in some cases, an information technology purchase, right? A requisition is not merely a payment vehicle. It is not something we simply use just to get accounts payable to issue checks. So you don't want to include phrases like, this requisition is to obtain a PO. Yes, of course it is, because that's the purpose of submitting a requisition. So you can just omit that as you're writing in your text to explain what you're buying. In addition, you don't need to say that this PO is to make a payment to the supplier or to prepare a check to the supplier. Again, it is more than simply a payment vehicle. It is the agreement that we are using to obligate the supplier to send us goods or provide us services or give us access to their IT solution. One more thing you want to remember on the requisition is not to submit partial payments on the requisition, right? You don't want to split your requisition up into multiples. So if you have 3 payments that you're going to make over the course of the purchase, don't split it into 3 separate rec POs. If you want to create 3 separate lines for you to be able to keep track of those 3 different payments or milestones, that's fine. Next slide, please. Another thing to keep in mind with the rec PO is that there's different documentation that applies at different stages. We've seen requisitions where someone will say, attached is the invoice agreement. Well, that's not quite right, because an invoice and an agreement are 2 different things. We get phrasing that just doesn't seem to, again, understand the process. The requisition is that initial stage. It's handled by the department. The key of what you're doing is you're making your financial commitment, you're approving the fund source, and you're approving the subject matter of the purchase. Procurement is approving the purchase order, the agreement, the terms upon which the supplier must provide the goods or services. It also obligates UCI to pay, but it does so on completion of the delivery or completion of the services. The invoice is the last piece, and again, it's separate. Those are handled by accounts payable, and it's supplier's notification that the services or the goods have been completed, and they are now demanding UCI to pay. Oftentimes we get departments reaching out and saying, hey, I see you approved the PO, but why hasn't payment gone out? Well, again, there's that 3rd step in the process. You do need to obtain an invoice from the supplier and submit it to accounts payable. They then make the payment, not procurement. Next slide. All right, now when you're writing in your requisition, you want to consider the audience. And there are 3 essential audience members that you might be writing this for. And the first is your central procurement or departmental buyer. And the key is you want to educate them on what you're buying. And so you need to include meaningful, accurate details so that we can determine what you're buying, in turn review the backup documentation, and help issue a purchase agreement within a very short period of time without unnecessary delay. The second audience member that you're trying to write this to is the supplier. You want to write a clear, detailed, meaningful agreement that tells them everything they need to do. You don't want to get anything more, and you don't want any less than what your department is agreeing to purchase, and you don't want to pay more or pay less. So you need to be clear in the structure of the payment, how much you're paying, and those sorts of details. Understandably, you've probably reached out to the supplier via email, telephone, maybe you even had a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting prior to submitting that requisition. Something everybody needs to understand is all of those pre-contract discussions and pre-contract emails are not part of the agreement. So you may have communicated what time to show up to the supplier, but if you don't put it in the contract, legally, you may not be able to enforce it if they show up at the wrong time. And that's why, again, it's fine to have those discussions prior to submitting the requisition and working out the details, but you need to restate them on the requisition so that we can hold the supplier accountable. The last audience member that you might be writing this agreement towards, hopefully this isn't the case, but it's something to keep in mind, is a neutral third party. If we end up in a dispute with the supplier as to whether or not they performed the services or delivered the goods, you will need to have a clear, detailed contract that obligated that supplier to provide X, Y, or Z thing. If it didn't, if you're relying on those pre-contract email discussions to say, we told the supplier this, but your agreement doesn't say it, you may not be able to hold them accountable for failing to deliver. A clear and easy contract will also minimize the likelihood that you end up in a dispute, right? The clearer it is for both sides, the better off we're going to be. Next slide. All right, so to give you an idea of what we in central procurement look at as we receive a new PO and we're considering we're beginning to understand what you're buying, these are the key fields we look at. And so these are the ones that you want to, again, when it comes to substance, make sure that these are filled in that they also provided meaningful information, right? We might start by looking at the description, move to the explanation box or explanation field. We would confirm that the supplier or vendor ID is matching, because sometimes that happens too, where the party that we're going to pay is not the party that's under all the documentation. The commodity code, again, that not only affects routing, but it's a piece of information that we use to understand what you're buying. And lastly, we might look at the line description. We're going to check all those things so that when we then turn our attention to the documentation that you uploaded, we already have an idea of what you're wanting to buy. So if you don't put any information in some of those fields, or you put minimal information, it is not going to help us confirm that the documentation that you provided is accurate. We have had situations where someone entered a date on the requisition and the order form had a different date, and we were able to confirm and make sure that one of those was correct. Had we simply issued the order form with the PO, the supplier would have showed up on the wrong date, and the department would have had to pay for those services because it got it wrong on the contract. We were able to correct it, and as a result, they were a happy department because they got the services they wanted. Okay, next slide. All right, so in the description field, again, what you're buying, this is a great way to start off telling us what you're buying. And here's some good examples that, because that field is short, the description field has a limited number of characters. If you put in a department reference number and your faculty member's name and some project, that's probably not going to tell us a whole lot about the purchase. What we are looking at from procurement side is what type of service are you buying and what kind of a supplier are we dealing with? So each of these are some good examples. You can customize it slightly by putting your department or school's acronym in there. But again, remember that it's a limited character field. So you need to be kind of short and concise with what you're going to add to it. Next slide, please. All right, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sarosh, who's going to help walk through what we want to see on requisitions for goods purchases.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. I'm Sarosh Sigankoria. I'll just walk you through one slide for goods purchase. And again, the main purpose is to give us meaningful information for the requisition. The first is the explanation field in KFS. What? Identify the type of goods UCI is purchasing, especially if it is not obvious. Please clarify if it has hardware with a software component, as that can trigger OIT review. When? Specify the delivery date for goods. So if it is urgent, we can try to prioritize and do our best to get the PO approved. How? State if the goods are sourced internationally and if they require custom clearance. Where? Please indicate where the goods will be installed or set up, if relevant. Also specify whether this is subjected to fair work, fair wage, prevailing wage, or covered services. Quotes. Please ensure the quotes are valid for at least 10 to 20 days from the submission date. Like Andrew mentioned, please avoid after-the-fact purchases. Miscellaneous. If the purchase is made under master agreement, please provide a UCI UCOP master agreement number or a cooperative agreement number. Thank you. Andrew?
Thank you very much, Sarosh. Next slide. So similarly, if we're buying services, we're going to ask some similar questions, but obviously it's going to result in different answers and it's going to be for different reasons. So if you're buying services, what you want to describe is, or what you want to provide at the explanation field is a narrative of the description of the services the supplier is obligated to provide and the deliverables owed. Oftentimes we receive explanation fields that tell us about the project that this service is being purchased for. And it sounds like a great and wonderful project that this faculty member is doing or a department's doing. But what you really want to focus in on, what is the supplier obligated to do? Those are the key details, because that's the information that helps us then turn it into a contract that enforces or forces the supplier to provide those services. Key details on buying any service is the start and end dates. Ideally, it would be start date here, end date here. But we understand that it's not always that simple. So you could say something to the effect of the services begin upon approval of the PO and will be completed by, and you enter either a specific date, or you could enter 6 months or 12 months, whatever the time may be. If you're having someone show up at a specific event, it's an ideal situation to make sure that they are aware of what the start time is for the event and the time that they need to show up to start their either setup or preparation, or they need to be available for a pre-event screening or meeting, something along those lines. Again, where the supplier is obligated to appear and provide the services is important, especially if it's an on-campus location. Sometimes they're not easy to find. If it's an on-campus location, stating the building or the specific location, whatever necessary details are there to get the supplier to the right place. As Sarosh mentioned too, services on campus trigger certain additional UC policies, so we need to be aware of where the work's going to be performed. It is oftentimes helpful if you have purchased a particular service in the past to mention that the last PO we handled was PO number X. But we want to be clear that just mentioning prior PO is not a substitute for including all of the details for this particular purchase. Next slide, please. All right, so again, buying software, buying IT solutions kind of has some distinct nuances, again, different from goods and services. What you want to identify and focus on is the name of the product or the license subscription, the number of seats that we're allowed to use. And here's a very important one because we're not familiar with every kind of software. What does it do and how is your department planning on using it? Now, every software solution has start and end dates, right? We don't typically get unlimited use of it. So again, identifying how long the subscription is going to be based on a start and end date is important. Additionally, we need to know, is it locally installed versus a cloud-based solution? Are you going to also be having the supplier provide installation or implementation services? And as many of you know who've had to buy software, the data issue is a very, very big issue, right? It is helpful if you can state in the explanation field, either the supplier will have no access to data, this was determined to be a low-risk situation by OIT security, or the supplier will have access to data and it's P3, P4, HIPAA data, right? FERPA data, whatever kind of data. Please see the attached OIT security view. Now, note that that presupposes you've already completed the OIT supplier questionnaire and OIT supplier security review. That we cannot state enough, again, how critical it is that you get that completed before submitting the requisition. This is information you should already have in your hand. And if you're not sure whether a supplier security review is needed in a particular situation, we highly, highly recommend that you work with your unit information security lead for your school or your division, and they can assist you walking through the question and answer process to determine if it's even needed. Again, the same thing may apply. You might be buying from a master agreement. If, in some instances, we have had to use supplier paper, and we signed a master service agreement or master license agreement 1 year, 2 year, 3 years ago, it is important that you obtain that agreement. You can pull it out, download it from the last PO, and you again include it with your requisition, because that whole purchase is governed by the master terms plus the order form that you get for this coming renewal. Simply submitting an invoice alone, an invoice by itself, is not enough to form an agreement. Because again, remember back to that earlier slide, the invoice is the last step in the process. We need to make sure we have the terms of the agreement set first. Okay, next slide. All right, so one of the things I want to kind of, again, emphasize is that the topics that we've worked through, the what, when, where, it's not going to be cookie cutter, right? It all depends on what you're buying. Now, there are some commonalities and there are some things. The biggest recommendation we can make to you is that you bombard that purchase with questions, right? If you're someone submitting information to you, ask them questions. If they give you a departmental request, purchase request, and it's got 5 words in a sentence, go back to them and ask them some questions, because guess what? We're going to end up doing the same thing to you. It's better that you get it now, right? Than that we have to stall or delay the PO because we didn't get enough information. So don't try to go to the slides later and do a cookie cutter sort of like, oh, I'm going to grab that and that's going to be my answer on every rec PO from here going forth. The key is use common sense, ask questions of the departments to try to get the meaningful information for this particular purchase. There might be details that you're going to want to share about your purchase that we haven't really addressed here because, again, it's specific to that purchase. It's very nuanced, but it will be helpful to make sure that the contract, the PO agreement, includes those details so the supplier is obligated to provide them. So I won't go through each of these examples, but hopefully they'll be on the screen long enough for you to get an idea that the description should be a narrative, right? In terms of key elements like what it does, the dates, the start times, those sorts of things, and any things that we need to make sure, like in a case of photography, how we're going to get access to those deliverables. Okay, next slide. And unfortunately, we did want to show you also some bad examples that we've received in the past, right? If you're submitting a rec PO and you want to tell us about your purchase, leaving the explanation field entirely blank is just not going to help us help you, right? And this is the key. We did this training not because we wanted to bore you to death, but because we wanted to help you so that we can help you faster by submitting a good quality requisition, right? We appreciate, for example, if you've uploaded other documents, but if all you do is say, see the attachments, right? You wouldn't walk into your mechanic, plop your keys down on the counter and say, fix it, right? And walk out. He might fix it for you. He might go through, he might have that for 2 weeks and put $10,000 worth of work into it because he's guessing what it is you want to do. So in the same way, you provide them some information so that as they start reviewing and trying to fix your car, they can focus and hone in on what they're doing. So just saying see attached doesn't necessarily help us. Don't leave us guessing. Help us get to the right place and get to the end on time and as quickly as possible for you. Okay, next slide. All right, and at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Helen Chang, who's going to give you some specifics as to capital asset entries.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So your requisitions, they have a lot of chances to purchase capital assets for the equipment. So what is the equipment, capital asset equipment definition? It is a standalone equipment. So it's not parts or components, because parts, components over 5,000, they are not equipment still. And this piece of equipment having the useful life 1 year or more and unit cost 5,000 or more can include equipment accessories that make the equipment working and sales or use tax. And if this piece of equipment is for the research and development equipment that your PI is using, for the research purpose, and of course, then we can apply to the reduced sales tax rate 3.8125, or otherwise would be the regular tax rate 7.75 rate. Next slide, please. So next one, I would like to refresh everyone's memories regarding the equipment object code. It's important to use correct equipment capital asset object code, so it'll route to the equipment reviewer to review your equipment purchase, equipment related purchase. So the most popular one will be the first one, 9,000 object code for any of the capital asset equipment. And I often see the department using the wrong object code for the software license fee. So if it's for license fee, please do not use 9230 or 9235. Those are for the software that to be owned by UC regions. The next one, 9303, is the equipment that you, 9303 is the plant account, right? When you have a budget office, give you the budget and to purchase equipment, that will be the code to use. And 93110, a lot of people using the do not do the right way. The 9310 is trading allowance on the equipment. So you will need to include the trading credit to the requisitions additional charges tab area, and then put you'll include what's the dollar amount negative of, let's say $2,000 for a piece of equipment. But you do, as Andrew said, you do need to explain furthermore at the explanation of the requisition. We need to know what piece of equipment, what's the tag number that you're going to trade in, and then how much is the credit, just in case, that you did not put it in the right field, and then we will help you out to, guide you how to correct your requisition. And then the fabrication, quite a bit of fabrication object code being used, especially in the School of the Engineering and the School of the Physical Sciences. And the PIs fabricate piece of equipment after we approve the property tag to be initiated. All right, and then computer will be 9900 object code. And office furniture, it's very seldom office furniture is over 5,000. Like unless you purchase a conference table, it's over 5,000. Then you'll be using that object code. Next slide, please. So here, I want to mention about the pre-award spending with federal funds. So when your PI is getting a pre-award, and then most likely, 99.9% your PI is going to get this federal award funded, but please do not let them spending without applying for the rest approval from the sponsored project administration office. And after their approval, then Contract and Grants Office will set up a new account under the federal fund block, FG or FC for federal contract, or PC for the federal pass-through account. And it's very important to do so. That way, the requisition that you are going to initiate, along with this new account number, then you will apply it, the purchase order, requisition would have a flagging message as well to remind you that to comply with federal funds purchase requirements, such as the SSPR form, the anti-lobby debarment verification on the suppliers, etc. Okay, thank you. I'll turn over to Doreen.
Thank you, Helen. So our resources are available, including Manhattan Stitching's website. If you can scroll over to the next slide. We do have a survey. We would love for you to participate and see if we can improve anything in the future, or if there's a specific topic you would like us to go over on a future department buyer training. I am also going to drop that into the chat here. And please note, I will be forwarding these slides over to everyone. If you don't have it, it's on our website right now, but the slides and the recording is going to be emailed to you at the end of this week and also placed on our website.
So
I'm going to open up the floor for any questions.
you
so
guys
please...
just need to be calm. Sit up,
Hi.
Jonah.
Okay. No problem. So I'm going to open up the floor to any questions. Feel free to raise your hand, type it in the chat, or unmute yourself.
Yes, and we have tried our best efforts to complete our presentations early enough to give you all time to ask questions, because in the last couple of presentations, we kind of ran all the way to the end and did not have opportunity to ask you questions. And that was a feedback we had received that we should leave some time open for questions and answers. So that's the reason why we have 13 more minutes left for you all to ask your questions. So please feel free to do so.
I have a question.
Hi, Emma.
Hi, Sneha and procurement. So is this procurement send out the PO to the supplier upon completion? Or is it when it's complete, when purchasing or procurement approves the PO, do they normally send it automatically to the supplier? And if so, is the requester copied when they send out the PO agreement to the vendor or supplier?
I can answer
So-
that, Snehal.
Yes, go
Unless
ahead,
you
Sean.
unless you want to.
So I guess let me answer and then you can correct me if I'm wrong. So Emma, I think every PO has the option of selecting whether it's auto sent, and if it's auto sent, whether it is sent via email or fax. If that box is not checked, that means it's a manual transmission of the PO. And the expectation is that the departments would be sending the PO to the supplier. We do send it from the central procurement office as a courtesy, but it would be better if the departments make sure that the PO is sent to the supplier, because so many times they are the ones who have the contact information at the supplier and they know who they are dealing with at the supplier's end. So many of times we do send it as a courtesy, but the department should take the ownership of making sure that the supplier receives the PO once it's approved, because I think the contract manager always gets the notification that they have received the PO.
Okay.
Or the PO has been approved rather. And so you would know when the PO is approved. And yes, you're right. As a best practice, if we were to send a PO to the supplier, it would be good to send a CC the department contact, so you also know that the PO has been transmitted.
Yeah, because I was just, you know how on this agreement itself, it says that only procurement will send it out to the supplier or something like that. So I just get confused if I need to inform, the supplier, this is your PO, or should I wait for procurement to send out the PO? Yeah, because I think there's on the form itself or on the agreement itself, it just says that only the purchase order or purchasing can send out this PO. So I just get confused, but yeah.
I think, go ahead, Shauna.
Yeah, you're correct. It's always best to avoid any duplications or any confusion with contacting the vendor to allow the contract manager, and that also is the responsibility of departmental contract managers as well. They have to be very aware, and that's part of their training about the transmission method at which Snehal went over. So if you see manual, you definitely, as the requester or as the person who initiated the requisition, should be included. Most of our team, if not all, are in the habit, but we're human, so sometimes we miss it. So if you ever have any questions, just let us know. But you should always be included on that manual transmission to the vendor. And also, if it is auto submitted, either via email, which is the preference. Fax is hit or miss nowadays, but some people do still have fax. But if it's fax or emailed automatically, unfortunately, we do not have the ability to CC anyone else. You would just know that it was approved, as Snehal also mentioned, and then you would check the transmission method on the PO just to double check how it went out to the vendor. But if there's any questions, just reach out to the contract manager.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Snail and Shauna.
No problem. Lovely to hear from you, Emma.
So we had a few more questions come in on the chat. Michelle said that it's very enlightening on the description fields, especially speaking specifically the explanation box at the top of the requisition form, or if you can briefly add explanation box at top. Can you reiterate that, Michelle?
Actually, I think I know what Michelle's referring to. We actually
Okay.
do have two sections that are referred to as description. There is the upper section, the first far left upper box, that's the description. That's the one that's a limited characters. It's helpful to provide that supplier name and either the type of service or the product name, something along those lines. And then immediately to the right of that is the explanation box or explanation field. The second area that's called the description is the line description. And that actually has, well, it's got unlimited entry, right? And that's where you would want to, again, focus on the specific item, right? Description that you're buying. The description that we had on that one slide where you're talking about the supplier name, that's the far left upper, the upper left box, not the line description. So thank you for clarifying that. Hope that's helpful.
And then we have another question. Is there a place we can go to see a list of vendors that UCI has used for various services? We're also looking for a vendor that has storage facilities for pallets of items and can pick up and delivery pallets for events. That's a great question. I personally don't know the answer to that. Snehal, do you?
So I think we do have a list of storage facilities because many people have asked for in the past. I don't think we have kept it visible or available. Maybe in our Q&A or FAQs, we can add that list of storage facilities in the local area that we have used in the past.
Alex
But I know
moving
people
in
have asked that.
storage. Yeah, Alex moving in storage is one of the first places I would recommend to see if they could accommodate what you're looking for. They're a local company, and they're also an agent for one of our major moving companies that we have an agreement with.
Thank you, Shauna. But that's something maybe we can put in the FAQs for people to search for or look for.
And then another question was on slide 33, Andrew mentioned including if the software is local or in the cloud and what kind of data it is. Does this information need to be written out in the rec if the information is already included in the attached supplier security review questionnaire?
Yeah, it is helpful to provide that high-level summary, which would include the kind of data that it handles and whether it's going to be locally installed or whether it's going to be cloud-based. Again, it gives a context to the purchase so that when we're either turning around and explaining it to risk services, we already have a full understanding of what it is before we turn to the actual attachments. The other thing that happens is that oftentimes, sometimes the attachments end up have conflicting information, right? We've seen where a supplier questionnaire will say it's locally installed, but then as OIT is going through the review, right, then we will see that it's they've noted it as cloud-based. Again, so if we can get that confirmation as to one or the other, it's just another helpful piece of information so that as we turn our attention to the backup documentation, we already have an idea of what this purchase is going to be about. It doesn't have to be like, again, you don't have to copy and paste the full OIT, supplier. It's a short piece of information that's going to kind of help give us a quick high-level overview of what's being purchased. Okay. And then I'm happy to take the next one to
Perfect,
Doreen.
thank you.
So there was a question, where do we find the fair wage, prevailing wage, covered services, and UCOP agreement numbers? So those references are actually policies and not necessarily agreements. Fair work, fair wage applies when someone performs services on a UCI controlled location. So it could be our campus, or it could be a venue that we are renting or leasing full time. Fair work, fair wage means that the supplier has to pay their employees the minimum wage that the UC has set in that policy. And then prevailing wage applies when suppliers are providing construction-based services. It's actually a public works type of a service. It's defined under the, I don't remember if it's not the public contract code, might be under the civil code. But if you are drilling into walls, erecting structures and it's considered a public works project, that's when prevailing wage would apply. And then with covered services, there are certain services that are determined by Regents Policy 5402 that should be insourced as often as reasonably practical. And if we were to outsource them, then there's some additional policy things that have to first of all, you have to get approval from Employee Workplace Force Relations, in addition to paying them certain minimum wages. Okay, so there's not specific agreements that apply in those cases. If you were to hire somebody that provided a service that triggered one of those policies, that's why we need to know about it in the requisition so that we correctly collect the right backup documentation and that we note it on the contract.
Yeah, the important thing is for you to mention whether it's local or services are provided locally or they are being provided off-site and not at any of the UCI locations. That is the important thing that you need to provide because that triggers, as Andrew said, different compliance requirements. And so, if you don't provide us installations of furniture or some other items, may require a prevailing wage, rates to be paid, and the contractor has to actually register themselves with the DIR for them to be able to perform that service. And we actually mark our purchase orders accordingly, whether that it has prevailing wage, fair work, fair wage, or covered services. So we can keep track of those. And so, it's important for you to be knowledgeable of all the various covered services. There are 11 different services that are falls under that policy. And if it's any of those, it's good for us to know to make sure that the Employee Workforce Relations has been contacted and you have gotten the exceptional approval to utilize those contractors for covered services. So that's the kind of information if you have on the rec, it helps us to expedite the review and approval. And then we do have a list of all the contracted suppliers on our website, and it does have all the contract numbers. So many times what happens and what Andrew was saying is that many times department will say that, oh, there is a UCOP contract and we are going to utilize that for these services. It will be good if you already know that there is a UCOP contract to put the contract number in there so that we can validate and make sure that it's still relevant and current. Because many times people will look at a prior PO from 4 years ago where they may have mentioned the UCOP contract number, but that contract may have expired in the last year. And we just, don't know whether it's still active contract or an expired contract. So those are the instances where we kind of, if you mention it's a UCOP contract, then provide the contract number so that we can actually make sure that it's an active and current contract. Hope it's making sense to everybody.
Something I also wanted to share, sorry, I meant to do this during the presentation. I know that the terminology sometimes can be confusing. We say PO or we say agreement. We think of it again as PO agreement because in the vast majority of cases, we are issuing the PO to serve as the agreement that covers that transaction, okay? We don't always execute a bilaterally, that is something that's signed by both parties, right? A purchase agreement or an IT purchase agreement for every purchase. So that again is why we have to think of this PO as needing as much detail as we can reasonably put in it, because that is going to be the agreement that obligates them to provide the goods, the services, or the licenses, okay?
And it also obligates us to make payments against those goods and services. So that's another reason why we always say that always make sure you have a PO, an approved PO, before you actually have the goods or services be delivered or provided. Because if you have somebody provide you with goods or services without a PO in place, you are obligated now to pay the supplier for whatever they provided, whether the PO is approved or not. And so that's an obligation on UCI's part that you are taking on to make payments to that supplier for any service they may have provided, whether your PO gets approved or not. So be mindful of that. Okay, we are past 3 o'clock. And we want to thank you all again for taking the time to participate in this 1 hour of training session. Hope you found it beneficial and useful. Please make sure to fill out the survey and don't hesitate to let us know what kind of training you would like to get, what kind of information you would like to get to help you to do a better job and for us to help you get things done faster and quicker. With that, we can end the meeting here. Thank you, everybody.